You're not stuck because life is hard. You're stuck because you're burning processing power on loops that produce nothing. Most people call this overthinking. Henry Ford called it waste. In a factory, when a machine runs but produces zero output, you don't praise its effort. You shut it down, find the defect, and eliminate it. Your mind is no different. The gap between people who build and people who stagnate isn't intelligence. It's operational discipline. You don't lack thoughts. You lack a protocol for converting thought into decision and decision into action. And every hour you spend in that gap is time you can't recover. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain is treating every problem like a crisis that requires infinite analysis. It's not. Ford didn't sit in meetings debating whether to standardize parts. He identified the constraint, implemented the solution, and measured the result. One cycle. Most of you are still on step 1 after 6 months. That's not caution. That's malfunction. The illusion is that more thinking equals better outcomes. It doesn't. Past a certain threshold, additional processing is just energy expenditure with zero output gain. You're running the engine in neutral and wondering why you haven't moved. The root issue isn't complexity, it's the absence of a cutoff. You have no protocol for when analysis ends and execution begins, so you loop. You revisit the same variables, you simulate outcomes you've already modeled, you mistake repetition for depth. This is the exact behavior Ford eliminated on the assembly line. A worker doesn't re-examine a bolt 5 times before installing it. He has specifications, he checks once, he proceeds. Your mind needs the same firewall. Without it, you're not thinking productively. You're running diagnostic cycles on decisions that are already clear. Stop here. This is where most people defend the behavior. They say, "But my situation is different. I need to be thorough." No. You need to recognize when thoroughness became procrastination. Ford didn't eliminate inspection. He eliminated redundant inspection. He built systems where each step had defined criteria and a pass-fail gate. Once a part cleared the gate, it moved forward. It didn't loop back for a third audit unless something broke. Your decisions don't need more angles. They need clearer criteria and enforceable cutoffs. Rule. Thinking that doesn't produce a decision within a fixed interval is waste, not wisdom. Most of what you call deep thinking is the cognitive equivalent of checking the same machine twice after it's already been cleared. There's no new data. You're not discovering insights. You're replaying information in slightly different configurations, hoping it will feel more certain. It won't. Certainty doesn't come from more analysis. It comes from action and feedback. Ford's assembly line worked because every piece moved to the next station on schedule. Delays weren't philosophical. They were diagnosed, corrected, and documented. You don't have that system. You have an open-ended loop with no forcing function. Let's fix it. Step 1. Define decision criteria before you begin analysis. Ford didn't ask workers to think about quality. He gave them specs. If the part met the specs, it passed. If it didn't, it failed. You need the same. Before you process the problem, write down what constitutes enough information to act, not perfect information. Enough. This is your threshold. Once you cross it, the decision is made. No extensions. If you don't set this in advance, your brain will keep moving the goalpost every time you approach it. That's the trap. Step 2. Set a hard time limit for analysis. 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever matches the scope of the decision. When the timer ends, you choose based on available data. This isn't reckless. It's operational. Ford's system didn't wait for perfect market conditions to ship vehicles. It shipped based on production schedules and inventory targets. If something was wrong, they'd fix it in the next batch. Your decisions work the same way. Most are reversible or adjustable. Treating them like permanent commitments is what creates the paralysis. You're not deciding your entire future. You're choosing the next step. Act accordingly. Step 3. Log what you decided and what happened. This is how you build pattern recognition. Ford didn't guess at efficiency improvements. He tracked cycle times, defect rates, and output per shift. That data informed future decisions. You need the same feedback loop. After you act, note the outcome. Did your criteria hold? Was the timeline sufficient? What would you adjust? This turns thinking into a process that improves over time instead of a recurring anxiety spiral. You're not aiming for perfection on the first decision. You're building a system that gets sharper with each iteration. Example, you're deciding whether to switch jobs. Most people spend weeks researching, recalculating finances, imagining worst-case scenarios. That's looping. Instead, write your criteria: minimum salary, acceptable commute, growth potential. Pull the data for both options. Set a 2-hour window to evaluate against your criteria. At the end, if one option meets more criteria, you choose it. If they're equal, you pick based on which trades you prefer. Then you move. Once you're 3 months in, you log what happened. Was your model accurate? What did you miss? You use that to refine your next decision. This is how operational systems function. You don't re-audit the bolt after it's installed unless something breaks. Now here's what this eliminates. It cuts rumination. It removes the false belief that more deliberation equals better results. It forces you to confront whether you're genuinely gathering information or just delaying discomfort. Most people loop because executing feels riskier than analyzing. But inaction is a choice with its own cost. Every day you don't act is a day you can't learn whether the decision was right. That's the real waste. Not making the wrong choice, refusing to make any choice, and losing the time that could have been spent adjusting. Rule: a system that produces imperfect decisions quickly will outperform a system that produces perfect decisions slowly, because speed allows iteration, and iteration allows correction. This isn't about rushing. It's about recognizing that thought is a tool, not a destination. Ford didn't admire machines that ran constantly. He admired machines that produced output on schedule with minimal waste. Your mind is the same. If it's running but producing nothing measurable, something is broken. Fix the process, not the person. You're not broken. Your system is just missing the cutoffs that would force progression. Implement them, measure the results, adjust as needed. That's how you stop losing time to loops that generate zero value. The people who build aren't smarter. They have tighter tolerances on waste and faster cycles between thought and action. That's learnable. That's replicable. You don't need to change who you are. You need to change how you process decisions. Treat it like an assembly line. Define the input, set the criteria, enforce the timeline, log the output. Repeat. Every decision that moves through this system is one less decision trapped in limbo. That's how you reclaim the time you're currently spending in neutral. If this frame works for you, apply it to one decision this week. Set the criteria, set the timer, decide, track it, see what happens. Ford didn't sell the process as theory. He proved it with results.